Hey everyone, thanks for listening to another episode of DIB Innovators. Today I'm speaking with James Gherdovich, the Chief Strategy Officer at Grid Aero. James, thanks for joining me today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Actually, I'm going to call you Gherdo, not James, so how about that?
Yeah, it's great. Yeah.
You can call me Otto. No, this is a really cool company. I've been following for a while, so I'm super excited to get you guys on, and thanks for taking the time. In order to kind of baseline everyone, why don't you give me a little bit of background? You recently have left the military and joined, Grid, which is a fairly new startup. So yeah, share kind of your background just to give everyone context of where you're coming from and your perspective.
Yeah, sure. So, as you said, retired about a year ago, and I was the deputy A4 at Air Force Special Operations Command, and sort of a lifetime of logistics. At the tactical level, I think probably the most relevant experiences I had, aside from combat deployments and that sort of thing, was I had the honor of leading teams into remote areas of the world to recover POW and MIAs. And so I had opportunity to really dig in deep to understanding, I would say, that the problem set at the edge in those situations, it was never some sort of kinetic environment, but certainly austere, and limited on what we had available, let alone, in a time of crisis, if you will, we had very limited plans for or options for recovery of ourselves and our teams. And then after leaving government, looking for, I'd always been sort of a closet innovator, even participated in startup world as a young CGO. We built a web-based food delivery business back in the early 2000s, which seems so cliche today, but the goal at the time was essentially trying to, provide delivery options for cadets out at the Air Force Academy while I was working at Peterson at the time. So fast forward, I had an opportunity to now contribute to the industry and look for the right roles, the right problems, try to find a way for what I would say my experiences and my own personal skills to align with a gap in the market, and found a great company in Grid with a great CEO and leadership team who gave me the opportunity to join them and look to accelerate this capability to the guys in the field.
Yeah, and we'll get into Grid, but why Grid? Like why was this interesting to you? There's a lot of startups out there. What made it cool?
So when I got out, I did consult for a few different technology companies, and for me, Grid scratched a lot of itches. Essentially, there's a huge gap in capacity. Indo-Pacific theater offers, I think, sort of the most readily available theater for folks to understand that problem set. But to say that across a myriad of different theaters, you see a big gap in the capacity required, and I would say the flexibility of options for commanders at the edge to be able to provide capabilities to, or I would say, provide effects to their missions. And so, these guys were developing a platform, leveraging autonomy. So you take the pilot out of the loop in terms of being able to manage risk in a more effective manner, and providing optionality for commanders in the field. And, simplicity of design, but at the same time, a novelty in the way that they are able to leverage, COTS products to move fast through the development cycle. And, having experienced this problem firsthand through multiple conflicts, and acknowledging that the way that we are seeking to present forces and fight in the future just seemed like a natural fit between my own experiences and appreciation for the problem and what the company was capable of doing for the warfighter.
So if you were to, in one sentence, one or two sentences, what is the mission of Grid Aero?
The essence of what we're doing is build an autonomous platform that can be presented to the warfighter as a modular open mission architecture capability for commanders to be able to present effects and provide sustainment to their forces in the field rapidly.
And so this is a logistics tool, if you will. It's a cargo airplane, but unmanned, correct?
Right. Correct. Yeah. It is a logistics platform. That was sort of what the birth of the company was, the platform itself was designed for. But I would say that the broader impact of this capability in the next fight would probably be more related to its versatility, its ability to roll on, roll off various types of capability, whether that's offensive or ISR, the ability to potentially evacuate casualties rapidly, So I would just say the versatility of an autonomous platform that can really shape shift to the need of the warfighter, in the field rapidly based on the desired outcomes.
which is really cool. A lot of the drones out there are little, pocket tactical drones, if you will, or larger ones that are providing effects. This is really the first logistics, and I'll use the word logistics, but kind of
Sure.
cargo drone out there. Are there any other folks tackling this problem?
I think there's definitely companies that acknowledge that there's a gap out there and they want to fill it. And I think they're a big part of the broader solution set that the DoD is going to need. But I would say that there's a lot of different ways that we differentiate that are going to make our platform, I would say, a better offering for the warfighter.
Okay, and we can get into that in a little bit. I want to go
Sure.
back to your pivoting into startup land. So for those, vets, military folks that are going into a startup, what's your experience been like?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I would say that it doesn't come without a lot of stress. I would say there's a big mindset shift required, and I would say that particularly at the point that you're making that decision to transition out, there's just a different pace, of decision making, of coordination across the company to get towards a solution that, while you're in government, regardless of the position you're in, you just can't really prepare for. I would say the flatness of startup organizations coupled with just the pace of the development of ideas that my it really took a lot of adaptation, and I would say, my brain was consistently tired probably for eight, so therefore like my entire body was tired for probably the first, 8 to 10 months out of government, just trying to adapt to the pace, which was fantastic. It still met, I would say, like a personal goal, to be able to contribute to that environment, but it was difficult.
Yeah, I see this with, I mean, I went through it too. A lot of, when you're in the military and you're commanding large organizations, small organizations, it's commanding at all levels or participating. When you get into the startup world, it's very, very different. You get into a big prime, if you will, a lot of the same machines, you're in process, but you walk into a startup, there are no processes, there are no books,
Yeah.
TOs, SOPs. You're
That's
creating them and you don't have a team to help you out at all. You're doing it all yourself. So that to me was a big shift as well. So I have that same.
Yeah. And frankly, there's antibodies to some of those types of structures too, that we feel comfort in coming from government, but they slow you down. They slow down the ability to make decisions because you have to refer to X, or execute process Y. I think that in our company and other companies that I've worked with in the past, that it's sort of a those are bureaucratic mechanisms that we took comfort in because they helped us to manage risk and, and level expectations across large organizations. But within smaller organizations, you really don't need those frameworks, and then they become their own burden, and you don't have the manpower or the human capital to really, dedicate to those instead of actually just execution.
Yeah. Give me one example of where you found challenge in the transition and one where you found, you know, it went a lot better piece, if you will, a success story.
Yeah, I would say on the challenge side, fundamentally just adapting to new tools for communication flow, and just trying to be able to, integrate with the administrative tools that exist. And sounds like it's such an old person sort of statement, but diving into some of the software applications that we leverage to communicate quickly and to make sense of our way ahead. That was a really big challenge. And
Like, what do you
then,
mean by tools? Like, give me an example.
yeah, Slack, trying to learn how to use Slack effectively. Google Suite, it seems simple enough and they've done a great job with those tools, but at the same time, you know, just just the shift from one operating system to another, it takes some time to adapt. And so as you're already, filling your head with all the details of the company and then building new relationships, then trying to figure out how to leverage these tools to have that type of level of coordination and build those relationships. It can just get a little clunky and create awkward moments that you don't want it to reflect on someone's perception of your dedication or your performance, or frankly even of your ability to adapt quickly. So anyway, that's still a work in progress, if I were being honest about it. Even you and I just trying to, I think everyone's had their moments with the video teleconference snafus, if you will. But again, great leadership team, very patient, but and a very learning, adaptive organization. And so I think, I've really enjoyed the experience and felt like there's been a lot of patience and shared learning through our journey together. On the positive side, I think the coolest part about joining Grid, I would say the most rewarding, it has been just the ability to jump right in, engage with willing engineers to adapt the product to meet the needs of the warfighter. The camaraderie, the small team camaraderie that only comes from folks all with a shared vision and shared purpose. Our CEO Arthur has done a great job of creating that environment, setting the tone. And so me coming out of the military and a lot of small team experience, a lot of athletic experience, being able to join and have a sort of like level of relationship with the team has been fantastic.
Yeah, the impact and the ability to quickly change things.
Absolutely.
Super appreciated.
Yeah. And just to engage in discourse about the prioritization and the focus of our design, and think about it both philosophically, but then, turn that philosophical idea into an actual product is phenomenal.
Yeah, that's very cool. Let's go back to Grid then. So when did they give me a little bit of history of the company, kind of how they started? I know you weren't necessarily there, but
Yeah. So let's just say roughly 18 months ago, there was a small group of co-founders that got together with an appreciation for the problem. Essentially, at the time, the real focus was on contested logistics before it became an Office of the Secretary of War, research and engineering, critical technology area. These guys saw the problem on the horizon, felt like a lot of them had come from the electric vertical takeoff and landing, I would say evolution of that market, and saw that they felt that technology wasn't going to provide a meaningful contribution at scale to the problem that warfighters are going to face. Decided they would go after developing, a elegantly simple, autonomous platform that could provide large quantities of payload over long distances. And the idea was born. I was actually introduced to the team, which was I think 3 people at the time, but well over a year and a half ago. And I don't want to say it was literally on a bar napkin, but it was sketched out on a notepad. We met for the first time in Austin, and I was pretty deep into capability development for special operations support forces. And so a friend of a friend said, "Hey, what do you think about this idea?" I said, "Man, if y'all can get that done, you're going to make a difference." I had totally forgot about it. 1,000 ideas get put across my desk. And then, a year later, I meet these guys, and they're talking to me about the fact that they just built an airframe in 6 months, and they're trying to get a better sense of what the warfighter requirement really is for this platform, and what they might need to do to really refine the idea to the prototype towards an MVP. And so I think I can help with that. So spend some time with them, really pro bono, just trying to help them understand the market fit a little bit better. And then after a few more engagements, next thing you know, we're talking about marriage. It was a good story for them as founders. I really appreciated the ability to join in when I did. I think it was pretty good, pretty great timing. And again, credit to the CEO Arthur for his vision and bringing the right people on at the right time to help the company grow.
So 6 months from idea, if you will, or maybe a detailed bar napkin to prototype.
That's right.
Now you know how long military acquisition takes, or many of us do.
Right.
Right. 6 months. Can't even begin to have the working group to discuss requirements in 6 months. How'd they do that? What was the magic sauce as you understand it?
Yeah, I think I would say like the most modern, engineering design principles in play. The fact that these guys all had come from established careers in engineering and applying their engineering education to build from scratch other platforms. So you had a lot of guys with just very unique experiences in building platforms from the ground up, were able to leverage their talents and education to design this thing, in the same vein from the ground up with a problem, with a good problem to solve in mind.
Did they have to go through certifications and airworthiness and all those things, or is it still as it sits not required yet since it's in theory like a combat type aircraft?
Yeah, I mean, there are still levels of, as you would imagine and you would expect and really appreciate, a lot of certs and waivers to operate and that sort of thing, and safety protocols to ensure that this platform is properly, that we're properly mitigating the risks as we operate it. But to move into the commercial markets and that sort of thing, those type of certifications will come into play. And so, it's part of our development journey, but that not where we're at in the story so far. I'll also say that there's been a lot of tailwinds related to efforts in the FAA to understand, this emerging market and work with industry to help build out policy that's practical and executable for what the market's trying to provide.
That's great. Yeah, that's usually a big problem. So I think this, whether you like them or not, this administration has started to move forward and break some of those silos down to help drive that. At least that's my perspective or perception of what's going on. Let's talk. I'm just sitting here. I'm sure listeners as well can think of 1,000 different things you could do with this. What use cases are really resonating with the customer, and what customers are you primarily interacting with where you see there's the most momentum?
Yeah, so all the services are looking at how they're going to execute distributed operations at the edge, and then how do they sustain these guys in the field. Again, it's the same problem I wrestled with from my own foxhole, at the staff level, thinking about the force constructs that we had designed to provide that level of support at the edge. How are we going to get these? How are we going to get these supplies to these guys? How are we going to? And we're talking about the basics. Not some elegant capability, but really, how do I get them? Beams and bullets. And no other solutions existed. And so that, well, I should say, in a contested environment, when the bullets start flying, I don't know how many C-130s we're going to see out there at the edge, dropping off capability to the guys that without it won't have anything. So, through our customer discovery, through our conversations with the warfighters, it really comes down first to making sure that the guys at the edge have the basics to execute their mission. And then I would say from there, we're evolving into, and as soon as you start having that conversation, just sort of like the hierarchy of needs of survival. Once you got your food and you have a full belly, then it's a lot easier to start talking about some of the more exquisite capabilities. You got me food. Well, can you provide sustained ISR or this particular area of operation for 24 hours? Can you provide other particular electronic warfare, either offensive or countermeasures to help, create a safer space for us to operate in a degraded environment? Can you yourself operate in a degraded environment? I would say that, one of the big lessons that we've learned from Ukraine and from other conflicts like out in Israel is that, being able to operate in a GPS denied or comms degraded environment is sort of a basic operating expectation and not a feature. I would say that our platform, being that it has been designed with those capabilities not just in mind, but as sort of a premise to what we're offering, that's I would say, aside from the effects that we're looking to provide for our platform, for its ability to operate in the future, these are basic design attributes.
Well, I think you have a picture. Why don't you share that with us and we can take a look?
Yeah, so you're talking about a 40 by 40 airframe, 40-foot by 40-foot airframe. The payload fits about 3 joint, J-mix, as they call them. Essentially, they're not 463L or larger pallets, but roughly the type of airframe or the type of cargo configuration that you would expect in, say, like a large helicopter. You'd probably put this side by side with maybe like a Cessna 208 or something along those lines.
Without a cockpit.
Without a cockpit, ability to be loaded from the nose and from the tail. So in larger environments or more mature, environments that seek optimization, you'll be able to use MAT equipment to load from the front. And then more austere environments, one will be executing airdrop missions. But then once on the ground, we're talking about, loads that can be downloaded by hand from either the rear and or the nose concurrently, or packaged and unloaded through existing containers like the J-Mix from on the aircraft without having to pull those cargo containers off the airframe.
Great. And so very cool looking airplane. What are kind of its performance specs?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, able to operate in both GPS denied and comms denied environments, airdrop capable, hard points, open architecture for other mission systems that'll be able to be roll on, roll off, and sit in that cargo bay as well. We just being able to provide other external power source for integrating some of those more exquisite capabilities that we would host.
Yeah, that sounds good. So obviously I have seen, Sikorsky, I think, has put out an unmanned helicopter, and you said it's about the same size. There's obviously big benefit in, an aircraft that can fly. How high does this generally fly?
Probably around 20,000 feet is what we're looking at. Yeah. But when I think about the Sikorsky, and this is going to be a little bit of a rant, I'm not against the company, but rather against the idea of taking a manned platform and looking to adapt it to be unmanned. You're talking about an extremely exquisite asset that you're already deeming to be, not worth putting in harm's way. And it's not just because you don't want to have a human lose their life or take the risk of losing a human. It's also because these platforms are slow to build. They take, and they're extremely expensive. Without talking specific, financial figures, our goal is to bring a very low cost platform into the market that can be, viewed as tradable in certain environments, and then mass produced. We need the Sikorsky to be able to perform this mission. If we lose one of those in the field, it'll be a significant emotional event for whatever unit that thing came out of. Whereas with our platform, our goal is that these will be somewhat ubiquitous, like a Land Cruiser or a Pajero, that if you lose one in the field, you'll have another one right there behind it, without having to break the bank or reach back to, the industrial base for a novel solution, or adapting assembly line to mass produce when we're just not equipped to do that anymore. The second part of that is just the exquisiteness of the supply chain of airframes like that. We're already fairly limited. And again, this transcends the Sikorsky or any, it's just the idea of looking to try to mass produce, our existing fleet. There's only so many rare earth minerals to go around. There's only so many exquisite parts available for some of these platforms. Being a lifelong logistician dealing with aircraft maintenance and supply chains, one small little part takes these things down pretty quickly. And so if we're already dealing with these, sort of self-inflicted wounds by optimizing our own supply chains, why would we think that it'd be a great idea to take the pilot out of it and throw it into harm's way, and lose the whole platform? It just, I think I think if you think about taking that type of level of cost and exquisiteness, and then strap on it an even more exquisite autonomy suite, you're only increasing the economic risk to the force by employing that in a kinetic environment.
Yeah, no, I think you made a great point. I mean, it's almost like, the cheap cruise missiles that they're trying to do affordable mass. This falls into the affordable. Obviously, a Sikorsky, so you take out the pilots, you didn't make it cheaper.
That's right. That's right. That's right.
Achieve, maybe in some unique perspectives or opportunity sets, situations where that's makes sense, but you have a great point. So are you using a lot of COTS material?
We are. It's not to say that some of these things can't be manufactured in-house, but part of the idea is that, these capabilities already exist, and so they're quick to integrate and allow for us to focus our engineering talent on I would say more, more of the core platform and areas in which we believe will add value to the warfighter that don't need to be designed in-house.
Perfect. How much does AI play into your solution?
I would say fairly significantly. The platform has the ability to have a pilot in the loop, similar to some of the, I would say existing ConOps for how we execute unmanned aerial systems today. But I would say one of the core differentiators is the ability to build a software that can basically replace the human completely, so that we'll have full flight profiles from taxi to takeoff and landing, to include any type of mission execution that happens during those sorties, will all be occurring autonomously, and that's all leveraging AI.
Are you guys producing your own software to do this, or is this?
Yeah. Yeah, the entire software stack is developed in-house. So you have a software stack dedicated to the execution of the platform, I just call it replacing the pilot. And then you have a separate software suite that's dedicated towards, I would say, the mission, if you will. So one makes sure that it flies well, and then the other one that basically provides the mission parameters for that software stack that's flying the plane.
How do you envision humans to participate in that? You mentioned it could have humans overseeing operations. How would this occur?
Yeah, so in terms of purpose, I think again our goal is to remove as much of that cognitive load and physical requirement from the human. But where humans do become useful, I would say would be in reorienting or changing the mission, or to provide some sort of exquisite entry of a new variable into the mission profile, such that sort of providing new input, if you will, to the platform, so that it change again. It would have some sort of resulting change in how the aircraft performs, but also again in sort of like the developmental level. We use that pilot in the loop to train the AI, to also as a safety protocol, so that if things go south, if you will, that there's an ability for a pilot to take over and make the appropriate corrections to maintain a safe flight. On the ground, I would say so. So that's so I would say we talked about the pilot type, pilot in the loop, and then you have the engagement with folks on the ground. We think a lot about how those warfighters at the edge are going to be exhausted, overtaxed, completely stressed from just from the environment. And so how do we take the cognitive load off those guys and the physical load where we can? We're incorporating all those themes into how we create the engagement between the guy on the ground and our platform as well, from simple things like ensuring that the payload bay is at a max athletic performance, if you will, height for those guys to be able to onload and offload both safely and without a lot of hazards involved, to also just the user interface on the ground and how they engage with the platform, to ensure that they understand that the platform is safe to approach, that they have simple guides that allow them, without any type of specialized skill, to be able to interact with the platform safely and provide inputs to it as deemed, if they're necessary, to help the platform to orient to the environment where those warfighters are located. Again, those are pretty bespoke sort of use cases, but just to say, we're trying to think about it very holistically from the warfighter experience, ensuring that the platform doesn't create additional cognitive load on them where we can prevent it.
Yeah, that's good. So 10 years from now, 5 to 10 years, what does assured logistics look like? And where is Grid Aero's place in that ecosystem?
Yeah, I had a senior leader talk to me about this topic from a strategic level, probably 2 years ago now, and it was a metaphor that kind of struck a chord with me. She basically envisioned the globe as sort of enveloped in this honey layer, this is logistics, if you will, just to make sure we're talking about the right domain, but or warfighting function. So you have this honey layer, such that if there's any perturbation or disruption in that honey layer across the globe, that it basically has this self-healing capability. That always has sort of stuck with me. And as I joined this company, it's sort of a design, from a system architecture perspective, sort of design principle that sort of emerges for me anytime I think about it. So I think assured logistics is that despite the operating conditions, that the system is able to self-heal and then provide that type of capability to the guys and gals that are expecting to be able to trust that the system designed to keep them, fed and sustained is able to do that, so that they can just really focus on the operational effects that they have in the field.
Well, I've got a couple. You've seen these on, I'm sure, other podcasts, but lightning round questions. Just first thing that comes to mind, and make it raw. Let's just see what you got. So we got 5 of them. So, what's the biggest myth or misconception about selling to the DoD?
Yeah, I think there's a big misconception about the amount of money available for just about anybody to come in and throw an idea at the government and hope that it might stick. When you really start to peel that back, the greater portion of the government or the Department of War's budget is really focused on getting the job done every day. I think it's about 15% or so that's really focused on thinking about how we can do things better. And then if you think about all those existing programs that already exist within the labs, they're going to labs and other industry partners that are working on those. It really takes this very small slice, let's call it like 2 to 3% of all the defense budget to actually be able to go find new entrants. And so I think although the defense budget is large, is huge, and although that there's maybe some tailwinds that infer that it might even get larger, it really does come down to competing in a strong competition for those limited resources to get your idea, resourced and developed by, in support of the Department of Defense. So, I don't think that should be a detractor. I just think that it means that that technologists and new entrants really should think hard about the problem they're trying to solve and ensure they have that understood before they try to expect that the government's gonna jump in and start to resource them. And the second part of that, I think, is just understanding what type of capital maybe they should be bringing to bear to bear that risk on their own before they even ask or consider asking the government for support.
Great answer. This is a lightning round question, Gerdo.
Yeah. Well, it's a lightning question. I can fill it out. You get thunder.
Or do you have 30 seconds? We'll
Okay. All right. That's my first one. It's my first one. This second one's going to be better.
Yeah, it's a great answer, and I think it's a great perspective. But what's the hardest lesson you've learned while helping to build and grow a defense company? I know it's pretty recent, but what you've seen so far.
Yeah. Well, I think the hardest lesson is, having spent my whole career on the other side of the market, in the demand category, and now I'm in the supply category, it's tough to compete for a warfighter's time, right? These guys are out there really trying to do the business to preserve our nation's security. And so, we're not really set up to think or spend time with industry. And so really trying to get any type of dedicated moments with a warfighter to think deeply about how we might bring this capability to bear is a challenge. And so trying to ensure that when I do come to the table to talk to warfighters that we've got, well-reasoned questions thought out and well-developed ideas on how we might integrate to help take the or get the most out of the time that we do have with them and ensure that it's not spent in sales conversations.
Fair enough. Quick sidebar, just real quick. What avenues do you find best to do that? Events, like how do you pivot to that, to get in there best?
Sure. I think the tip of the hat goes to the senior leaders that acknowledge that this is a problem, and that there's been a huge shift, in my opinion, over the last few years in trying to create opportunities like that for us to have those conversations. So yes, there are definitely no shortage of symposiums and summits and that sort of thing. And we do get work done on both sides of the market, I think, in those venues. But I think the more intimate moments where we're having demonstration events or exercises that are being established just for the opportunity to test and demonstrate new technologies is probably where we earn, more money on both sides as well. Where guys who actually have real meaningful capability are stress testing it in representative environments and allowing warfighters to break it and tell them where it doesn't do what it needs to do to make a difference in their own understanding of what their effects should be in the fight. If I could just marinate in that for one more second. I think the other opportunity that offers is for the warfighters to think differently about the fight, and helps to stretch their own imagination and develop new GTPs that otherwise wouldn't be presented if they didn't have those engagements with industry.
Perfect. What's a sacred cow in defense tech you think will be proven false?
Yeah, I think the adage of what got us here isn't going to get us there. I think that and I do believe that this sacred cow is one that's actually being put on the altar as of late, but being able to pivot off of different technologies and looking for ways to harness the ingenuity that exists within, I would just say the non-traditional entrance to the market. I think that's the secret sauce to us being able to bring the right capabilities to bear for the future. I don't think it's about that every company that's coming in is going to have the right solution. But as a system, if we're able to adapt and find ways to adapt our ability to pivot on the technologies that matter, I think that's the secret sauce that will maybe get it done in the next fight.
Biggest opportunity in defense right now?
I think the biggest opportunity is the fact that we have taken that first step to pivot the acquisition system to be able to onboard and test and then decide without a whole lot of baggage. I think that's going to be the biggest opportunity for companies like ours to be able to demonstrate what we're founded to do, and then allow the DoD to make a decision about whether this is the right direction or not. Give us the feedback, and then allow us to pivot and go back to the table.
Fantastic. Well, Gerdo, this was awesome. I love meeting you, by the way, and learning more about Grid Aero. If folks want to follow Grid Aero or get in touch with you guys, how best to do that?
I think you drop in on the website, Grid Aero, and that's Aero like aerospace, AERO. And likewise, Otto, I'm grateful to be able to sit here at the table with you in my very first podcast. So, feel free to grade accordingly.
Well, your lightning round, I'm going to give answers. Your quality was an A, but your time management, I'll give you a C.
I think everyone in my life would give me the same feedback, man.
A man of many words. Now, this has been super fun. Really appreciate it, and we'll see you at the next event.
Yeah, thanks, dude.